The first time I walked through the Halstead's front door, I understood two things at once. 1. The house had been designed to intimidate. 2. It was working, just not the way they hoped. The entryway smelled like polished wood and expensive candles that tried too hard to smell like heritage. The walls were lined with framed black and white photographs of people I didn't recognize but was clearly supposed to admire. A mahogany staircase curved upward like a stage set, wide enough for a bridal gown and an audience. Celeste Halstead met us in the foyer, perfectly still, like she'd been placed there earlier and hadn't moved since. Her mouth lifted into something that resembled a smile the way a knife resembles a spoon. Her eyes traveled from my face down to my simple navy dress, my flats, the small gold pendant I wore under the collar. Then she leaned toward her son, my fiancé, Grant, and murmured in a voice she thought was private. "Did the caterers send her early?" I heard every syllable. Grant's shoulders tensed. He didn't correct her. Not immediately. He just gave a short laugh like he'd heard a joke he didn't enjoy. I smiled anyway, because I had already made my decision before I stepped onto their porch. I was going to let them underestimate me. My name is Maya Chen. I'm 33, and I have a confession I haven't said out loud to anyone, not even Grant. For almost a year, I've let him believe I'm comfortable, but ordinary. That I'm in a support role. That my little rental apartment and my 10-year-old Honda are my limits, not my choices. I never lied. I simply didn't correct the assumptions he made after he heard the word tech and pictured whatever fit his world. I learned a long time ago that people reveal their truest selves when they think you can't do anything for them. My aunt, who raised me after my parents died, used to say it like a law of physics: character shows up when the stakes are low. If only I knew what I was walking into, because the moment Celeste Halstead mistook me for staff, I realized this dinner wasn't a welcome. It was a test. And I had no idea what was coming next. Grant and I met the way people meet now, through timing more than fate. A friend had dragged me to a coffee shop near the river on a Saturday I planned to spend debugging a stubborn security protocol at home. Grant was there in a crisp button-down, the kind that still held its shape even after someone sat in it for an hour. He'd ordered something complicated and pronounced it like he did it often. When our orders got swapped, he apologized with such effortless charm that I almost forgot I didn't care about the drink. He was warm in the way that makes you feel chosen. Not loud. Not desperate. Just attentive. "What do you do?" he'd asked me. "I'm in tech," I said, because I was, and because I've learned that most people don't actually want the full answer. He nodded like he understood. Then he smiled and said, "So you're on the admin side? Scheduling, exec support?" It was such a specific assumption that it startled me. It was also oddly familiar, like watching someone confidently solve a puzzle using pieces from a different box. "I support teams," I said, "because I do. I support teams with architecture decisions and threat models and late-night incident response when something breaks. I just didn't add those details." He filled in the blanks himself. Over the next few months, I noticed how easily he categorized the world. Not in a cruel way. More like a habit he'd been raised with. He called servers the staff. He called service workers sweetheart, in a tone that sounded polite but felt practiced. He tipped well, but the gesture landed more like performance than gratitude. I told myself those were small things. I liked how he listened when I talked about my aunt. I liked the way he remembered that I drank tea when I was stressed and kept herbal packets in his kitchen. I liked that he didn't flinch when I said I didn't want anything flashy, not even for my birthday. He nodded, kissed my forehead, and said, "You're not like other women I've dated." I should have asked who he'd dated. Instead, I fell into the softness of being wanted. My Aunt Lien would have raised an eyebrow at that. She always said the problem with being competent is that people assume your competence is available to them. She built her own consulting firm from nothing, then sold it quietly and lived the same way she always had: simple apartment, plain clothes, no need to prove anything. When she died, I found a letter in her nightstand, the kind written in neat, deliberate lines, like she wanted to make sure every word landed. She wrote, "Don't chase rooms where you have to shrink to be tolerated. And, watch who people are when they think you're irrelevant." After she passed, I inherited more than memories. I inherited a portfolio she'd built over decades. I inherited a network, people who remembered her honesty, her precision, the fact that she never treated anyone like a stepping stone. I also inherited the freedom to choose my life without begging anyone to fund it. But you'd never know it from looking at me. I live in a small apartment because I like small spaces. I drive my old Honda because it's reliable and doesn't announce anything. I wear my aunt's pendant because it feels like an anchor against my skin. Grant never asked deeper questions. When we talked about money, he spoke in broad strokes: investment goals, family expectations, legacy. He assumed my goals were smaller. He used phrases like, "Once we're married, you won't have to worry as much," and I'd smile even as something in me tightened. Then, 6 months in, he invited me to dinner at his parents' house. "It's kind of formal," he warned. "My mom is big on first impressions." He said it lightly, like it was a joke, but his eyes didn't laugh. I considered telling him the truth then. The job title. The salary. The fact that my stock grants alone could buy his mother's dining table and still leave me enough for groceries for a decade. But I heard my aunt's voice like it lived in the walls. "Watch who they are when they think you're irrelevant." So I said yes. I wore a simple dress. I drove my Honda. I tucked my pendant under the collar and walked into a house that smelled like expensive candles and quiet contempt. And that's when everything shifted. After Celeste's comment, the air in the foyer thickened. Not with awkwardness, Celeste didn't do awkward. With power. With the subtle pleasure of someone who just placed you where she wanted you. Grant leaned down, kissed my cheek, and murmured, "Ignore her. She doesn't mean it." It was the first lie of the night. Celeste Halstead meant everything she said. She took my hand like she was accepting a donation, not greeting a person. Her grip was limp but deliberate, as if warmth might be mistaken for approval. "Welcome," she said. "Grant didn't tell me you'd be so understated." Her gaze flicked to my shoes. "Comfortable," I offered, smiling. She made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had ever belonged to joy. "Well, come in." The house was a monument to money trying to look like pedigree. Crystal light fixtures that threw prismatic shadows across walls lined with faux classical art. Furniture chosen for appearance, not comfort. A scent of old wood and new varnish, like they'd recently renovated to impress someone who hadn't shown up yet. In the living room, a woman in a cream sweater and diamonds the size of water droplets glanced up from her phone and gave me the kind of smile you give a stranger who's standing too close in an elevator. "That's Brooke," Grant whispered. "My sister." Brooke didn't stand. She didn't extend her hand. She just said, "Hi," and immediately turned back to her screen. Grant hovered, uncertain, then drifted toward his father near the window. Frank Halstead was built like a man who used to be athletic and decided his body owed him rest for the rest of his life. He shook my hand firmly, then looked past me as if searching for someone else. "Nice to meet you," he said, and it sounded like he was reading it. There was another man in the room, older, with silver hair and a posture that suggested he hadn't spent his life trying to look important. His suit wasn't flashy, but it fit like it had been tailored by someone who cared about quiet details. "This is Leonard Price," Celeste announced. "Old friend of the family." Leonard's eyes narrowed when he looked at me, not in suspicion, but recognition. Like I had stepped into a memory he couldn't quite place. When he shook my hand, his gaze lingered on my face. Then it dropped, briefly, to my pendant. Something flickered in his expression. A question he didn't ask. Dinner was served in a dining room designed to remind you that you weren't the one paying for it. A table long enough to host a board meeting. Candles arranged with geometric precision. Place settings with so many forks it felt less like a meal and more like a puzzle you could fail publicly. I watched Celeste notice me noticing. "Oh," she said, voice sweet with false concern, "are you familiar with formal settings? Don't worry. You can just follow Grant." Grant's jaw tightened. He didn't speak. I smiled and said, "My aunt taught me the only rule that matters is how you treat the people at the table." Celeste's smile froze. Brooke let out a small snort into her wine. And then the questions began. Where did I grow up? A small town in Washington. Where were my parents? Gone, when I was young. Oh, Celeste breathed, and her sympathy landed like a stone. That must have been difficult. Without proper guidance. I kept my voice even. My aunt raised me. I had everything I needed. Brooke leaned forward, her diamonds catching the candlelight. What did your aunt do? She ran a business, I said. What kind of business? She pressed, like she was testing whether the answer would entertain her. Consulting, I said lightly. Nothing glamorous. Celeste nodded, satisfied. How practical. Then she asked about my job. I work in cybersecurity, I said. She blinked once. Oh. So, support staff? I support teams, I repeated. Grant shifted in his chair. He cleared his throat, like he might say something. Then he didn't. That was the moment I filed away with clinical precision. Grant was embarrassed. Not just by my clothes. By what his mother thought my clothes meant. Brooke sipped her wine and said, Grant, did you tell her Serena's coming to the engagement party? The name hit the table like a dropped glass. Serena. Grant's eyes flicked up, too fast, too controlled. Celeste's face softened for the first time all night, like the muscles remembered how to move when the subject was worthy. Serena Vallon, Celeste said warmly, as if she were blessing the room. Such a lovely girl. Brooke smiled. And so accomplished. Her family's company is doing so well right now. It's impressive. Grant's fingers tightened around his fork. I kept my expression neutral. Who is Serena? Celeste tilted her head. Oh. Grant didn't tell you? She and Grant were together for years. Everyone assumed, well. Her smile sharpened. We assumed they'd end up together. Brooke added, almost casually, her father's firm has been expanding. The kind of expansion that helps other businesses too, if you know what I mean. I looked at the walls then, because I could feel Celeste watching me, waiting. Behind me, framed photographs lined the far wall, holidays, graduations, post-charity events. And in more than one picture, a dark-haired woman stood beside Grant, her hand resting on his arm like she belonged there. Serena. Celeste didn't need to say another word. The photos said it for her, this is who we expected. This is who fits. Brooke watched me closely, like she was hoping for tears. Instead, I smiled. She looks happy in those pictures. Brooke blinked, thrown off. Celeste recovered first. Well, she said smoothly, I just hope you won't feel out of place in our world. Not everyone is accustomed to certain standards. Then, with the gentlest delivery she could manage, she said the words she wanted to lodge under my skin. Common, she said. There's no shame in it, of course. Common. Grant finally spoke. Mom. That's not, Celeste patted his hand. A mother wants the best for her son. The unspoken part hung in the air like smoke, and you are not it. Leonard Price lifted his glass slightly and said, quietly, sometimes the simplest lives belong to the strongest people. Celeste shot him a look that could have frozen water. Leonard ignored her and looked at me. What was your aunt's name? He asked. I hesitated, then answered. Lien Chen. His eyebrows lifted. Not dramatically. Just enough to show something clicked. He said nothing else. Dinner continued like that, questions shaped like knives, smiles shaped like warnings, Grant's silence stretching longer than any table could justify. By dessert, my appetite had vanished, but my clarity had sharpened. This wasn't just a difficult family. This was a system. And I had no idea what was coming next. After dinner, Celeste announced coffee in the sitting room, as if she were hosting a royal court. The men drifted toward the windows with brandy. Brooke disappeared for a call. Celeste excused herself to check something with staff. Grant leaned close to me. I'm sorry, he whispered. She can be intense. I noticed, I said softly. He exhaled like he'd survived something, then offered a smile that felt rehearsed. Just, give it time. Time. The word people use when they want you to absorb cruelty quietly. When I asked for the restroom, Grant pointed down a hallway lined with art that looked expensive until you stood close enough to see the print texture under the varnish. I walked slowly, letting the house speak the way it wanted to: money, performance, coldness. Somewhere in the distance, a door clicked. As I passed a partially open study door, I heard voices. Celeste's voice was low, sharp. Brooke's was eager, like she was thrilled to be part of strategy. I should have kept walking. But something in Celeste's tone stopped me. I paused in the shadow of the doorway. She cannot stay, Celeste said. Grant is not throwing his life away for that. Brooke laughed under her breath. I can't believe he brought her here. I thought this was like the time he decided he was spiritual and stopped eating gluten. That was a phase, Celeste snapped. This is complicated. And the timing is terrible, Brooke added. Dad's meeting with the bank next month. The Vallons want a decision. The Vallons. Serena's family. Celeste's voice tightened. We need Serena. We need her father's line of credit. We need their distribution network. We need someone to back us when the renovation loans come due. My stomach went cold. Renovation loans. Bank meetings. Needing Serena. This wasn't about taste. It wasn't even about pride. It was about survival. Brooke continued, and her voice brightened like she was discussing party decor. Grant was supposed to keep Serena warm. That was the agreement. He's supposed to keep her interested while we finalize things. Celeste made a frustrated sound. He told me he was handling it. Brooke's laugh turned cruel. He's handling it by falling for the placeholder. Placeholder. My fingers curled around the hallway's cold wood trim. I could feel my pulse in my throat. She's just temporary, Brooke said. Something to keep him occupied. You can tell she's grateful. Like she's waiting for permission to belong. Celeste's voice softened, but not with kindness. With calculation. We make the engagement announcement. Public commitment. That buys us time. Then we find a way to end it before the wedding. Brooke asked, almost gleeful, how? Celeste exhaled. We discover something. Something real? Brooke pressed. Celeste paused. Then she said, evenly, if it's not real, we make it real enough. I felt my hands begin to shake, not from hurt. From rage. Clean, sharp rage. Brooke laughed. She's too naive to suspect anything. Honestly, he picked well. Someone like that just wants a ring. Celeste chuckled, and the sound made my skin crawl. Exactly. I stepped back silently, moving away from the door. The hallway seemed longer than before. The art felt like it was watching. In the bathroom, I turned on cold water and pressed my palms against the sink until the tremor in my fingers calmed. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was composed. My eyes were not. This was the betrayal, not just the way Celeste and Brooke treated me, but what they thought Grant was doing to me. What they believed I was worth. What they were planning. The worst part was that their plan only worked if Grant cooperated. I walked back to the sitting room with a smile that didn't belong to happiness. And that's when everything shifted. The furniture had been rearranged. Candles moved. The lighting softened. Celeste stood by the fireplace with a look of polished anticipation. Frank hovered near the doorway like a man waiting for a dentist to call his name. Brooke leaned against a shelf, pretending not to watch. Grant stood in the center of the room, nervous in a way I hadn't seen before. Not romantic nervous. Strategic nervous. He turned when I entered. His smile flickered into place. He took my hands. "Maya," he said, voice slightly too loud, "I've been thinking. I know this is fast, but I know what I want." He lowered himself onto one knee. A ring appeared in his hand, large enough to be noticed from across the room. Sparkly enough to photograph well in dim lighting. The kind of ring Celeste would approve of. The stone caught the light, and I saw something that made my mind calm in a single click. The diamond wasn't clear. The setting was uneven. The ring was performance, not promise. Grant looked up at me. "Will you marry me?" Celeste's smile widened, triumphant. This wasn't love. This was a trap dressed as a gesture. I had choices in that moment. I could say no. I could walk out. I could end it cleanly. But then I heard Brooke's laughter in my memory. Too naive to suspect anything. And I heard my aunt's voice, "Underestimation is a gift." So I said, yes. Grant exhaled like relief. Celeste clapped as if she'd just watched a show she'd funded. Brooke offered congratulations with the warmth of an ice cube. Leonard Price, standing near the doorway, met my eyes. His expression didn't match theirs. It was steady. Curious. Almost approving. I smiled back, small and controlled. Because now I wasn't guessing anymore. Now I was collecting proof. Over the next few weeks, I played my role perfectly. I attended dinners. I endured Celeste's comments about polish and standards. I let Brooke ask questions that sounded innocent and felt like traps. I watched Grant's phone buzz and disappear into his pocket. I watched him compliment me in front of his family like a man reading lines he didn't write. But I also did what I do for a living. I investigated. I didn't hack anything. I didn't break laws. I didn't do anything dramatic. I did the boring work that destroys liars. I read filings. I pulled public records. I traced corporate registrations. I looked at loan documents that were publicly searchable if you knew where to look. I mapped timelines like I map systems, finding the weak points, the places where reality doesn't match the story. And what I found was ugly. Halstead Development, Frank's company, had expanded too fast. They'd taken on high-interest loans during a boom, assuming the market would stay kind. They'd used the estate renovations as collateral. Their bank covenants were tightening. Their cash flow wasn't challenged. It was fragile. Then I found the strange line items. Consulting fees paid to shell companies. Expense reimbursements that didn't match any real vendor. A pattern of withdrawals that looked like small money, until you added it up. Brooke Halstead wasn't just spoiled. She was siphoning. And that's when everything shifted again, because the story wasn't just about how they saw me. It was about what they were hiding. One night, Grant told me he was meeting a client. He kissed my forehead and said, "Don't wait up." Instead, I parked across the street from the restaurant he named. He didn't walk in with a client. He walked in with Serena Vallon. They sat in a corner booth. Their heads tilted close together in the way intimacy does without permission. At one point, he reached across the table and took her hand. She laughed and touched his cheek like she had every right. I didn't feel my heart break. I felt something sharper. Clarity. I took photos, not for court, not for drama. For memory. So I wouldn't ever talk myself out of what I saw. But I had no idea what was coming next until Leonard Price called me 2 days later. "How long have you been engaged to Grant?" he asked. I froze. "How did you get my number?" A pause. Then, quietly, "Your pendant. The one you wear. Lien Chin gave that to you, didn't she?" My throat tightened. Leonard continued, "I knew Lien. Years ago. She helped me rebuild my firm after a breach nearly ruined it. She was the most principled person in a room full of sharks." He exhaled, and I heard something like regret. "And the Halsteads," he said, "are sharks who learn to smile." I didn't answer immediately. Leonard's voice softened. "If you need someone who understands their business, I might be able to help." I stared at the photos on my phone. Grant's hand over Serena's. Serena's smile. Then I said, "I do need help." And that's when I stopped being reactive and started becoming deliberate. The engagement party was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Celeste spoke about it like it was a coronation, not a celebration. Every detail was curated for witnesses, the guest list heavy with bankers, developers, local politicians, and the kind of philanthropic board members who confuse charity with networking. The party wasn't for love. It was for optics. Leonard and I met twice in quiet places, once at a small cafe near the university, once in a law office conference room borrowed from a friend of his. He didn't bring a dramatic folder. He brought spreadsheets. He brought timelines. He brought the calm of someone who's watched wealthy people destroy themselves by believing their own myth. He confirmed what I'd found. Halstead Development was wobbling. They were banking on a partnership with the Vallons, Serena's family, who owned a distribution network that could stabilize Halstead cash flow. "They don't need love," Leonard said. "They need a bridge." "And I'm the placeholder," I said. Leonard nodded once. "Yes." Then he surprised me. "They've done this before," he said. "Not exactly like this. But close. They create narratives that make people look unstable when they don't comply. They're careful. They don't get caught doing anything illegal, until someone inside gets greedy." "Brooke," I said. Leonard's mouth tightened. "Yes." I felt my mind settle into a decision as if it had been waiting for the last piece. I wasn't going to confront Grant in private and let him rewrite the story. I wasn't going to cry in Celeste's sitting room and give her the satisfaction of labeling me dramatic. If I was going to exit, I was going to exit in a way that made reality undeniable. That's the thing about systems. They can only function when people agree to the illusion. So I planned for the party. Not to humiliate them for entertainment. Not to destroy them out of spite. To make the truth visible to the people who actually mattered. The bank's compliance officer would be there. Celeste had bragged about it during dinner, calling him our biggest supporter, as if support were something you could charm out of a spreadsheet. The Vallens would be there. Serena would be there. Celeste wanted the whole town to see how close the families were. Grant would be there, smiling for photos, pretending the future was secured. And I would be there, too, no longer playing small, no longer letting them label me. But I had no idea what was coming next, because the night before the party, I gave Grant one last chance to be honest. We were in his apartment, going over guest lists and seating charts Celeste had emailed like she was organizing a military operation. Grant looked tired. His charm was slipping at the edges. "Are you okay?" I asked. "Just stressed," he said quickly. "Mom is intense." I watched him carefully. "Grant," I said, keeping my voice casual, "is there anything you need to tell me before tomorrow?" His eyes flicked up, and I saw it, fear, fast and bright. He smiled. "No. Why would there be?" I held his gaze. "Anything at all." He laughed lightly. "Maya. What is this?" I let the silence stretch just long enough. Then I said, "Serena." His face went pale for half a second before he pulled it back together. "She's an old friend," he said. "Nothing more." I nodded slowly. "Okay." He exhaled like he'd passed a test he didn't understand. In that moment, I understood everything. Grant wasn't trapped. He wasn't helpless. He was choosing. He had lied to my face with ease. And that's when everything shifted inside me from heartbreak to boundary. On the day of the engagement party, I opened the closet I almost never used. Not because it was secret. Because it wasn't relevant to my life most days. Inside hung the clothes I bought for conferences and boardrooms and dinners with people who signed contracts worth more than Celeste's home renovations. Tailored pieces. Simple lines. Quality that doesn't beg for attention. I chose a dress the color of deep green glass. Understated, but unmistakably expensive to anyone who knew what they were looking at. I put on my aunt's pendant openly, letting it rest where people could see it. I slipped on a watch I usually wore only when I traveled for work, nothing flashy, just rare. Then I drove my old Honda anyway. Because the point wasn't to prove I could perform wealth. The point was to prove I'd never needed to. Halstead's lawn had been transformed into a series of white tents lit with chandeliers that hung like borrowed stars. Waiters moved with trays of champagne. A string quartet played something soft and expensive, the kind of music that says, "Class," even when nobody is listening. A valet approached my car and hesitated. "Are you with the event staff?" he asked carefully. I smiled. "No," I said, handing him the keys. "I'm the fiancé." His face flushed. "Of course. Sorry. Ma'am." I walked toward the tent like I'd done it 1,000 times, because I had. Just not in their world. People noticed almost immediately. Not because I looked like a different person. Because I looked like the person I'd been hiding. Whispers moved through the crowd the way wind moves through tall grass, fast, subtle, impossible to stop once it begins. Frank Halstead saw me first. His practiced host smile froze as his eyes traveled over my dress, my watch, my posture. Celeste saw me a minute later. Her face changed in a sequence so quick it almost impressed me: confusion, calculation, disbelief, then a thin layer of composure slapped on top. She stepped forward. "Maya," she said, like my name was suddenly unfamiliar. "You look lovely." "Thank you," I said warmly. "You've done a beautiful job with the event." Her eyes narrowed. "That dress," she said lightly, "is it new?" "Not really," I said. "Just from my closet." Brooke appeared at Celeste's elbow as if summoned by danger. She looked me up and down. Cute, she said, smile sharp. Rental? I gave her the designer's name. Brooke's smile stuttered. Celeste's fingers tightened on her champagne flute. Where did you, Celeste? I said gently, you should enjoy the party. It's a special night. Grant found me near the champagne station, his face strained. His gaze darted from my dress to my pendant to my watch like he was trying to solve a math problem he didn't want the answer to. What is going on? He hissed, low enough that no one nearby could hear. I smiled. It's our engagement party. Maya, he said, voice tight, you look like you're someone else. I held his gaze. I look like me. His throat worked. We need to talk. Privately. Later, I said. We have guests. Then I did something simple that changed the air completely. I introduced myself properly. Not Maya. Not Grant's girlfriend. My full name. And when someone asked what I did, I answered clearly, without shrinking it to fit their assumptions. I'm a principal cybersecurity architect at Northbridge Financial, I said, smiling. A woman nearby blinked. Northbridge? Wait, are you the Chen who? Yes, I said pleasantly. Eyes sharpened. Phones were checked discreetly. Names were searched. The whispers grew louder. Celeste moved through the crowd like a general trying to regain control of a battlefield. Leonard slipped in quietly, as he'd promised, and found me near the edge of the tent. He didn't touch my arm or draw attention. He simply said, "The compliance officer is here." I nodded. Good. And the Valens, Leonard added. Serena's father is near the bar. Perfect, I said, and my voice surprised me with how calm it was. Grant's hand found my elbow, not gentle now. Maya, he whispered, what are you doing? I turned slightly, keeping my smile for the crowd. I'm letting reality catch up. He swallowed. Please. Not here. Grant, I said softly, you chose, here, when you proposed in front of your mother like it was a performance. His eyes flashed with panic. But I had no idea what was coming next, I narrated later, because the moment Celeste stepped onto the small stage to begin the toasts, I saw exactly what she planned to do. She wasn't just announcing our engagement. She was announcing a partnership. A future. A narrative. She took the microphone, smiling wide. Thank you all for being here, she said, voice smooth. Tonight is about family. Legacy. And exciting new chapters. Frank stood behind her, posture heavy. Brooke hovered, eyes bright with anticipation. Grant stood beside the stage, searching for me like he hoped I'd vanish. Celeste continued. We are thrilled not only to celebrate Grant and Maya, but also to celebrate new opportunities for Halstead development. The compliance officer's expression tightened. Serena's father tilted his head, listening. Celeste lifted her hand. And now, she said, I want to welcome my future daughter-in-law to say a few words. The crowd turned. All eyes found me. I walked toward the stage, heels quiet on the grass. The tent fell into a hush so complete I could hear the string quartet stop mid-note, unsure. Celeste handed me the microphone, her smile fixed, her eyes warning. I looked at Grant. His face was pale. I looked at the crowd, people who understood contracts and consequences. People who didn't care about Celeste's opinions unless money was attached. And I said, calmly, yes. I would like to say a few words. And that's when everything shifted. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't perform outrage. I didn't cry. I spoke like someone presenting facts. Thank you, I began, letting the silence hold. Celeste, thank you for hosting such a beautiful event. Celeste's shoulders loosened slightly, like she thought I'd chosen obedience. Then I continued. When I first came to your home, I said, I made a decision. I decided to let the Halsteads see a simple version of me. A version without expensive clothes or impressive titles. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Celeste's smile tightened. I wanted to see how I would be treated, I said, if you believed I had nothing to offer. Brooke's eyes widened. And what I learned, I said steadily, was illuminating. I paused, letting the word land. I described the dinner, the comments about being staff, the questions designed to rank me, the way Serena's name was used like a weapon. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't dramatize. I used the same calm tone I use in incident reports. Grant, I said then, turning slightly toward him, sat beside me while his family called me common. Grant flinched. Celeste lifted her chin. Maya, I held up my hand, polite. I'm almost finished. I turned back to the crowd. And then, I said, I heard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. The tent went still. I watched Serena's father's face change, cautious now. The compliance officer's gaze sharpened. I heard Celeste and Brooke discuss how to deal with me, I said. How I was a placeholder. Someone to keep Grant occupied while arrangements were made for him to return to Serena. Gasps moved through the crowd like a wave. Grant grabbed my wrist. His grip was too tight. This isn't, he began. I lifted my phone with my free hand. 2 weeks ago, I said calmly, Grant told me he was meeting a client. I tapped the screen and held up a photo, Grant and Serena in a restaurant booth, his hand over hers. The crowd didn't roar. Wealthy crowds rarely do. They whispered. They turned their heads. They calculated. Serena's cheeks flushed. She didn't look at me. She looked at Grant. Grant's mouth opened, closed. Maya, I can explain. You had a chance, I said quietly, into the microphone, and the words carried. I asked you last night if there was anything you needed to tell me. You looked at me and said no. Grant's eyes filled, not with remorse. With fear of exposure. I turned back to the crowd. There's more, I said. And this is where it stops being about me. Frank Halstead's face went gray. I work in cybersecurity, I said, which means I'm trained to find patterns. Weaknesses. Gaps between stories and systems. Celeste's voice sharpened. This is inappropriate. It's accurate, I said, and my calmness made her anger look childish. I nodded toward the compliance officer. Mr. Dillard, I said, reading his name from memory because Leonard had told me. You're here tonight because Halstead Development wants to look stable and trustworthy. His expression didn't change, but his eyes did. They became professionally cold. I won't accuse anyone of anything I can't document, I continued. So I won't accuse. I'll provide. Leonard stepped forward from the crowd, not dramatically, not triumphantly. He simply handed an envelope to Mr. Dillard. It contains publicly available filings, I said. Loan disclosures. Vendor patterns. Corporate registrations. And, most importantly, transaction summaries that suggest internal diversion of funds. Brooke's face drained of color. Celeste took a step forward. This is a lie. Leonard spoke then, voice even. I'm an accountant, Celeste. I don't traffic in lies. I traffic in math. Brooke's breath came fast. You can't, I looked directly at Brooke. The consulting fees paid to your shell companies, I said softly, add up. Brooke's husband, standing near the bar, drink forgotten, turned to stare at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Frank's hands trembled slightly at his sides. Celeste's composure cracked. "You will regret this," she hissed. I held her gaze and said, into the microphone, "I don't regret the truth." Then I did the part that wasn't about them. It was about me. I slid the ring off my finger and held it up. The tent lights caught the stone, and for the first time, the cloudiness was obvious. "I won't be marrying Grant Halstead," I said, voice steady. "Not because his family doesn't like me. Because he chose deception over honesty. Because he allowed me to be used as leverage in a business strategy. Because love that requires silence in the face of cruelty isn't love." Grant's face crumpled. "Maya, please." I handed him the ring. The metal clicked softly against his palm, a small sound in a very quiet tent. "Give it to Serena," I said gently. "Or don't. But don't give it to me." Serena flinched as if I'd struck her, but I hadn't. I'd simply stopped participating. I set the microphone back on the stand with care, like closing a file after finishing a report. Then I stepped off the stage. The crowd parted as I walked through it, not like water in awe, but like people instinctively making space for consequences. Behind me, Celeste's voice rose, sharp and desperate, trying to recapture a story that had already collapsed. Frank sank into a chair, head in his hands. Brooke grabbed her husband's arm, whispering quickly. He pulled away, expression stony. Grant stood frozen near the stage, ring still in his hand, as if he'd finally realized he couldn't charm his way out of math. Outside the tent, the night air felt colder and cleaner. I drew a breath that felt like stepping out of a room where the oxygen had been controlled. Leonard joined me near the edge of the lawn. He didn't smile. He didn't congratulate me. He just said, quietly, "It's done." "Will there be fallout?" I asked. He nodded. "There should be. The bank will investigate. If Brooke's been diverting funds, it won't stay private." I watched the tent glow behind us. "I didn't want spectacle," I said. Leonard's voice softened. "You didn't create spectacle. You ended deception." I touched my pendant unconsciously. Leonard looked at it. "Lien would have been proud," he said. My throat tightened unexpectedly. "I hope so," I whispered. Then I walked to the valet station, took my keys from a stunned attendant, and drove away in my old Honda, quietly, without looking back. But I had no idea what was coming next until my phone buzzed once on the drive home. A text from Grant, "Please. Don't do this. We can fix it." I didn't answer. Because some things aren't broken. Some things are simply revealed. A week later, I was sitting at my kitchen table in my small apartment, wearing my soft robe, sunlight cutting a clean line across the floorboards. My tea steamed gently beside my laptop. The city outside my window sounded the same as it always did: cars, distant voices, the ordinary hum of lives continuing. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Local developer Halstead Development faces bank review after internal irregularities flagged. I read the article slowly. No dramatic language. Just facts: a tightening relationship with lenders, a pause on certain projects, a pending internal audit. A line about a financial officer stepping back temporarily. No names. No mention of me. That was what I wanted. Truth, not attention. My phone buzzed again. A message from Grant. "Can we meet?" "Just coffee. I need to explain. I still care about you." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I deleted it. Not out of bitterness. Out of boundary. I stood and walked to the window. The morning sun had lifted higher now, bright and indifferent. I touched my pendant, feeling the familiar warmth against my skin. My aunt's letter sat in my nightstand, folded the way it had been for years. Sometimes I didn't even need to read it. I could hear it. Don't chase rooms where you have to shrink to be tolerated. Watch who they are when they think you're irrelevant. Grant and his family had shown me who they were when they believed I had nothing to offer. And I had shown myself something too. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need a ring. I didn't need a last conversation for closure. I had my own life, built carefully, honestly, on my own terms. I rinsed my mug, put on simple clothes, and prepared for work. My real work. The kind that mattered. The kind done with people who respect competence and character more than pedigree. Outside my window, thousands of windows caught the same sunlight. Thousands of stories unfolding. Mine was quieter now. Cleaner. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like the air belonged to me. If you liked this story, feel free to subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next one.